Welcome to the Psychovertical podcast. I'm your host, Andy Kirkpatrick. It's what time is it? It's 9 o'clock. Vanessa's in the other room watching some kind of terrible rom-com. So I thought I'd do this podcast. We've had no internet for a few days for some reason. All the internet was out everywhere here. So I apologise for the lateness of this podcast. As usual, I've got nothing prepared, but someone did send me. Someone asked me about food. Had a food question, so I thought I'd maybe do this podcast on the subject of food, like mountaineering, climbing, sort of related food. So I actually, one of the first things I ever wrote for a magazine, which was for Climber magazine, which I actually found out still exists, amazingly, was called M&M's Pig Fat and Baby Food, which is, it's up on my website somewhere in the articles, I think. And, it was quite a good article, really. Like a lot of there was an issue of Climbing magazine, Climber, Climbing. Is it Climbing in America? Climbing magazine, and it was a really amazing, probably the best issue of any magazine I ever bought, really. I don't know what number it was. It had a white cover and had a picture of Greg Child on the front cover, and there was a story about Greg Child putting up his route on Mount Hunter in Alaska. What's it called? Greg Child, he always had like really sort of dark sort of names for everything. I can't remember what he's got. He was very like a Mark Twight. Mark Twight must have been based himself on Greg Child. What's it called? Or something? Because he wanted to called. He had this new route he wanted to do on El Capitan, and Greg Child and Bill Denz were trying to put up this new route, and eventually they never finished it. And then someone else, and they were going to call it like the Heart of Darkness, because it went right through this, like the diorite on El Capitan, which is black rock, which would have been kind of cool. But then what's his name? Rob Hall. He finished the line. He did the line, and he called it Wyoming Sheep Ranch. And I think Rob Hall, like on every belay, he left like a sex aid hanging on every belay, so there'd be like a dildo or whatever, like on every single belay. So he was kind of the anti kind of Greg Child, kind of intense, kind of thing. So, but Greg's Australian, so it's kind of weird. It's weird that Greg would be like that, because I think Australians they're like people from Yorkshire, basically. They don't like any of that kind of pretentious kind of stuff. So what's that? Anyway, well, this is amazing this amazing edition of this magazine. It just had like so many really cool articles in it at that time. Like, magazines seem to be a lot better in the past. I don't know why. They all seem a bit shit now. I don't know why they're so shit, but they are. I don't know why. I don't know maybe it's just an age thing. But if you get some old copies of some of those old magazines, and I don't know, they seem to be written by like adults, if that makes any sense. Like, they seem to be, I don't know. I think almost you get this thing where like editors are just bored of climbing, and they're bored of climbing magazines, and they're always trying to, think up some new, just stuff about climbing. It's just boring. No one's interested. So they're always trying to find some, someone who was, they're tying the story about doing a 5'8" without being raped or something, or they're always trying to, some transgender people being oppressed by the climbing community and all that kind of stuff. They never seem to just be interested in just writing something like, look, love, I don't care if you're transgender, just write something about climbing that that, that's interesting. We're not interested in all the other stuff. We try to go climb to get away from all this crap. So just, we're not interested. That's probably why I'm not an editor of a climbing magazine with that kind of attitude. But anyway, so I got some, early on. I think like what was the first thing I ever wrote? So the first thing I wrote something about ice hooks. I remember writing that because I remember writing it and on someone's computer. I didn't really understand how computers worked, and I think I highlighted it and deleted it all. So I had to write it again. And things like I would like print it out and then just take the print out with me, and then I'd like type it all out again from the print out. And I did those classic things of having everything would be like Comic Sans or some shit font, which I couldn't read it when I had to type it out again, and basically that kind of thing. So, but this was definitely one very early thing I wrote, and I think because of a few of these things I wrote, I ended up getting like regular work on Climb magazine, and then eventually I got like a gig being like the gear editor. I was kind of poached by High magazine, which was another magazine, which I used to think was a bit shit really at the time. But looking back at it, I think it just wasn't that well. Just the layout, it wasn't as very snazzy. Because like On the Edge was another good magazine, and that looked really snazzy. It had like good graphics and all that kind of stuff. And it had some really amazing stuff in there, really amazing writing in there. And so I ended up being like the gear editor for High magazine, and that was kind of cool. But with all these things, eventually you just kind of run out of steam, run out of energy. And I think High magazine amalgamated with On the Edge magazine, and then both those turned into Climb magazine, not Climber or Climbing. And then by the like with all these things, you have like a bit of a, I don't know how people like write for newspapers for years and years and years. I have a column or whatever. It's pretty desperate. But anyway, so this was a very early piece of writing I did, and it was basically completely copied from this piece in Climbing magazine, which was someone just talking. I'll dig it out and I'll read it sometime. But it was just someone writing about equipment in a very interesting way that I'd never read anything like that before. It was written in a way it was just really well written about. I remember once, I think it was Monty Don or one of those like gardening people. He wrote something about spades, like a good spade. And it was really amazingly written. Like, I have no interest in spades, but it was written in a way that was like, oh my God, I need to buy one of these spades. He just made it sound, he really brought a spade to life. And I was like, God, I remember thinking like, God, that's like real talent to bring a spade to life like that. It wasn't about spades. It was about something else. And that really stuck in my mind. And I remember a long time later, I was at some literature thing and I said I was like a shit writer. And then Stephen Venables was like, if you can write, I disagree. Like, if you can write stuff about socks, it's interesting, then you must be a good writer. So thank you, Stephen. That was very nice of you to say that. So, but I remember this article I read where he was writing about, ideas about equipment for alpine climbing, and then interspersed throughout it was these little tiny stories, like one paragraph stories, and it just elevated the whole thing. And I never anything else by him, this guy, but it was very good. And I ended up like basically copying that on quite a few early things I wrote. I wrote something about Wiregate carabiners, which was the same. And so it's kind of interesting. So maybe this is going to be really boring, this thing. So I'll just read a little bit. So this was called M&M's Pig Fat and Baby Food, which was sometime in the mid 90s, I guess. Before I start, let me define what I mean by alpine food. Basically, I see it as any food that's lightweight and easily prepared with a minimum of fuel, fuss and effort in sometimes very difficult circumstances. This article is applicable to any alpine climbing, from Fitzroy to Hunter, to Trollwall to Trangor, aimed at climbers genuinely interested in a lightweight approach to alpinism. I admit it is partially biased towards my own experiences and tastes, but it does include a few new, interesting and obscure ideas on modern alpine food. Pre-climb food. Eat a lot and eat well before you climb. The old favourites of cheese and pasta is still the best, providing plenty of carbohydrate and fat. On easily approachable routes, take lots of nice foods to eat before you start. Things like pasta, tasty cheese and fresh bread, plus plenty of cakes, buns and chocolates for pudding. Maybe buy some fresh pastries to have as breakfast before you start. Enjoy the time before the climb. Good food helps you relax and sleep. Take bottles of water to cook and brew up with, and make sure you're completely hydrated before you start. Better to lay off red wine. A good approach of a major pre-climbing diet is your typical Patagonian diet. Noel Crane and Simon Nadine spent 1.5 months waiting for a decent weather window while trying a new route on Piney, most of which was spent cooking with the occasional day climbing to break up the washing up rota. Their staples were garlic dal, pancakes, chapatis, and the great foundation of British mountaineering, porridge. On such trips, little bags of carefully weighted calorie-counted food goes out of the window if morale and sanity is going to survive the trip. Enjoyable food is essential. Better to start a route a little fat and happy than lean and mean, because after 4 days, you'll be very lean anywhere, except maybe not quite so keen. Don't overdo it, though. It's important to be and feel as fit as you can be. Next section, morning food. As a climber, for a climber like Mick Fowler, breakfast is usually a single affair, a cup of tea and a toffee crisp being found to suffice for a day's climbing. Or if you like your creature comforts, try Mark Twaite's power bar washed down with milky contents of last night's hot water bottle. Nice. But if you're trying to move fast and you've bivvied in a difficult or uncomfortable position, then this meal is crucial. Get it wrong and you'll lose time and energy. Get it right and you'll start the day as you mean to go on. The best way to save time and fuel is to forgo a hot drink. Cold fruit tea, or better still, a carbohydrate drink is the way to go. Down 1 or 2 cups and you're racked up and packed up for dawn, and you're away, saving time and fuel inconveniences. This also lets you do all your snow melting the night before, avoiding the chilling task of snow melting in the morning. Also means you avoid difficult tasks in the coldest time of the day. By filling up your Nalgene bottle with warm water, if you want to warm your feet, after your evening meal, you only have to do the difficult task of cooking once a day, making cooking simpler and more efficient. On alpine routes, fluid is king. Even on hard multi-day routes, your body can keep on climbing on a couple of tracker bars a day if it has to, but dehydrate and you're dead. If you're running short of fuel, drink cold, barely melted water with carbohydrate drink instead of solid food. Melting snow inside your sleeping bag or clothing with your Nalgene bottle also saves vital fuel. Solid food is usually best found in easily consumable muesli bar form, be it Tracker, Harvest Crunch or Flapjack. 2 bars are usually equivalent to a typical serving of porridge or muesli. Again, fuel is saved and the bars can be eaten along with pre-melted water inside sleeping bags or during packing. I also add a packet of peanut M&Ms to this meal, stashed away to eat on the first belay. If you want a more traditional start to the day, individual packets of Alpen, etc. are perfect for alpine climbing. Just add water, or if you're really indulgent, add a little powdered milk. Shame on you. Personally, I try to avoid normal tea and coffee because it's a diuretic, preferring fruit teas, of which there are hundreds of varieties. If you can't go without your Earl Grey or Nescafe, never mind. As with all things in life, it's good to break a few rules. So the first meal is out of the way and you're off. The sun comes up, you finish the first pitch, only 37 left to go. Next section, day food. This is entirely up to personal preference. Some people like dry bananas, nuts and sunflower seeds, while others prefer chocolate, salami and jelly babies. Try not to get too bogged down in calorific nonsense. Just take what you like to nibble on and make sure you do. If it has a high calorie content, then it's a bonus. A mix of savoury and sweet usually works very well. Boiled sweets were the old favourite, revitalising dried mouths, especially when mixed with a little snow. As an alternative, why not go down to your local supermarkets, pick and mix? Because, as they say, variety is certainly a spice of life. No doubt, once on a route, you'll wish you'd brought more licorice torpedoes and a few chocolate eclairs. But never mind, it's great fun digging around in your sack for hours on end in a futile attempt to find that last cola cube. Try to avoid any powder-type bars that require lots of water to digest. Enough said. Evening food. Modern alpine food can be easily split into two categories, the high-tech and the low-tech. The introduction of Power Gel from America is set to revolutionise alpine food, being lightweight, instant carbohydrate energy, 300 plus calories per serving, that's squeezed into your mouth from a foil packet or tube, which, unlike power bars, requires very little water to digest. It's light, it doesn't need cooking, and it's available in various strange and tasty flavours, including vodka. Powdered baby food is another high-tech option used by a fanatical few, providing easily prepared, highly nutritious, easily digested food, although price and taste make it quite hard to swallow. Speaking of vodka, a great example of low-tech alpine food is the Russian alpine diet of pig fat or sala, dry biscuits and vodka. Makes your mouth water, doesn't it? They're also mad on condensed milk, using it as a drink or a meal in itself, plus it can be turned into a solid block of caramel by boiling it in a can. Low-tech alpine food can be cobbled together using just about anything. Adam Wainwright and Paul Pritchard served up Christmas stuffing on Nameless Tower, while Stevie Haston soloed a new route on the Mont Blanc face of the vert, carrying on an apple and banana. A typical meal, for me, goes like this. First of all, have a litre of cold energy drink, usually a mixture of High Five or Isostar. Drinking cold water saves a lot of fuel and gets liquids to the body quickly. This is followed by a hot cup of soup. No direct cooking is done in the pan, as all the food is mixed or stewed in a large insulated plastic mug, the type found in increasingly in a number of climbing shops, an invaluable piece of alpine equipment. As more snow is melted and boiled, I usually try and relax and drink my soup, adding croutons or stuffing mixture to add a bit more bulk. Take lots of different cup of soups because you can soon tire of one taste. The main course is usually 1.5 packets of super noodles. These are crushed into the mug and boiling water added. Stir, replace the lid, and within 2 minutes you've got a litre of noodles, filling, nutritious and extremely lightweight. Another alternative is potato powder. This is followed by more fluid in the form of a square of fruity jelly mixture or carbohydrate drink. There may be some custard, semolina or hot chocolate. Salt is a vital part of a meal, reducing cramp and muscle spasms while bivvying or climbing. And I usually take a few individual packets of bran biscuits and cheese, a nice accompaniment to a meal. To anyone reading this, not already established on some alpine route, this may seem like a very Spartan diet. Actually, for me, it sounds like quite a lot, but it's incredibly lightweight and easy to cook, using only 100 Epigas cartridge or less per day, between 2. If you plan on taking a long time on a route, 4+ days, or you feel uneasy taking such a small amount of food, you can flesh this out with various items mentioned earlier, or just say to hell with it and take some heavy luxuries. Even hard men like Brendan Murphy and Dave Wills couldn't ration themselves less than 1 packet of chocolate hobnobs a day while attempting Le Toc. If you're prepared to work a little harder, then take it. This approach of food seemingly ignores the calorific content of the diet. This is only half true. I do try to keep the carbohydrate level high, with fat close behind, although the higher the climb, the harder the body will find it to break down fat. Sugars are high in calories, but technically make poor man food. Chocolates and sweets are only there to improve morale. Last section, night food. there may come a time when you're forced to keep on climbing through the night, either due to approaching weather, lack of any bivvy sites, or just lack of bivvy gear. Adrenaline will suppress the appetite, and although food will be the last thing on your mind, you should try and eat through the night. Tomorrow's breakfast of Tracker bars and M&Ms and those cheese and biscuits you have stashed for dinner suddenly become perfect belay food. If you're out of water, I'd probably lay off the food in order to avoid using up vital fluid digesting it. Some climbers carry Pro Plus as mild stimulant in order to stay awake, a real problem while belaying, while some American climbers carry chocolate-covered coffee beans, which they chew. Both systems are only worth considering in real emergencies, as caffeine may cause more problems than it solves. So that's the end of that. So there's interspersed some like stories about climbing and stuff. But it's funny because that was written a long time ago. So that was written before I think Mark Twiight's Total Alpinism book came out, and so there wasn't a huge amount of information around then. And I guess this was written based on, I think, going to Patagonia. I've been to Patagonia and I've been to like climbing the Alps and things. So I guess I wonder. Yeah, it's interesting how it's sort of changed. Probably one thing is like climbing food really varies depending on what you're doing. There isn't really like a one size fits all. Like on some climbs you might take very little food. Like I remember climbing with Matt Dickinson, and we tried to do like a 1 day ascent of Tangerine trip on El Capitan, and it ended up taking us 3 days. And Matt brought the food, and all he brought was like a glass jar of salsa and some chocolate. And he like basically ate all the chocolate, and I think he had like one swig of this glass jar of salsa, and that was all we had for like 3 days. It ended up being like a 3 day, 1 day ascent. And it's amazing. I think there was something about Napoleon. And Napoleon said that one of his chief, he liked generals who were lucky, but he also liked soldiers who their ability to fight was less important than their ability to have some kind of fortitude and to keep going in adverse conditions. And that does seem to be an important thing in alpine climbing, is people who can just keep having like second winds, third winds, fourth winds, and they can keep on going. And I remember the second alpine route I ever did, we did like a winter ascent of the northeast spur of the Dwats, and on our first bivvy, the stove wasn't working. We had this stove, and it wasn't working. And instead of going down, we decided maybe we could get to the top in 1 day to finish the route. And I think we had like 2 more bivvies in the end. So we ended up like being 3 days on this route, 4 days in total, with almost like zero food to eat and very, very little water, like just almost no water. And it was like pretty hellish, but it's amazing how you can kind of keep on going upwards. But it's probably not right. Like when it's super cold, you don't want to be super dehydrated because it affects your ability to stay warm, and you'll get frostbite and stuff. It's not ideal. So you always want to have you always want to have the ability to melt water, and you need to have a really good cooking system. Like never go anywhere without the ability to to create heat, and to not just to melt snow, which is like vitally important, but it's also often in some places it's the ability to just boil water. So like if you been to quite a few places where the water sources were like obviously like super contaminated, and I think that is probably the problem with a lot of people when they're climbing in the Himalayas and things, is they just get like a bug through the water. Like Colin Haley always seems to be going on these expeditions, and he always gets ill with some kind of bubonic diarrhea or something, and it always like wrecks his trip. And So yeah, so if you're able to, when other people are cooking for you, that's like a separate problem. There's all these classic things like if you ever eat out, you need to avoid like salads or anything that's washed in water. Like like chips, I reckon are quite good. Chips or like if you're in things which are fried seem to be okay. You just lay off the salad and lay off any make sure you just drink Coke or something. Just if it's not boiled, be really careful. I think when we were in Africa, we were there for a long time, and I think I only got like ill once, and I think that was probably caused by like Mount Kenya is just like absolutely like it's like really really contaminated. Like everything is really contaminated. Like you're drawing water from like in some places from like a really small body of water, and all around it there's like stones with shit underneath it where people have had a shit. So you kind of it's like a worst case scenario. And I think in those kind of situations, I think the water is so contaminated that it's almost impossible not to cross contaminate. Like you'll dip a pan into the water and the contamination gets on your hands, and even if the water's boiled, it's like really, really hard not to get ill. So it's just good to avoid, being in places like that. So some people will even go to the point of carrying like two stoves. Like if it's a real like life or death thing, you might want to carry two stoves, and two stoves can allow you to, the classic stove was like the jet boil in the past. So like, if you have two jet boils and two people can bivvy in separate places, you can double the speed at which you can melt water, and for a very very minimal amount of weight, because like the pan of one of those small stoves can be the cup, and it replaces a lot of other things. So it's if you're going like super 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 lightweight, then it can be like counterproductive. So, but I remember when we I think the second time I went to Patagonia, that was the first time I ever realized that this kind of lightweight kind of alpine style food thing doesn't work on expedition. And I think we were really skinned because it used to be really expensive to go to Argentina because the peso was the same as $1. And then the last time I went, it was like 5 pesos to the dollar or something. I remember that all we could eat was we bought like loads of polenta, which is like disgusting stuff. And we didn't realize you're supposed to mix it with milk and cheese and it makes it a bit better. But it was just like inedible. And we had these really awful tins of some kind of fish, which was just mainly bones. And it was just like, it was absolutely disgusting. And it just really didn't provide a lot of energy. So that trip was really undermined by just being fucked the whole time, carrying a lot of weight around, in Patagonia, it's a lot of like carrying a lot of, it was like the winter times. We're trying to climb Cerro Torre in winter. So we had like really heavy packs, and it just grinds you down. Like if you're deficit of calories in your system and you're not committed already onto something, then it really saps your psyche and your motivation really. You're just thinking about going down and having some food or whatever. I remember on that trip we came down. I think we'd been round the back of Fitzroy, and we came back down after like a week being up there in the snow hole. And when we got back in this hostel, there was like nobody used to go there in the wintertime, but amazingly there was like this Italian couple who'd like just rocked up. And I think because in the Patagonian winter is our summertime, so I think maybe people used to get confused, and they were like, "Oh, do you want some food?" And they were also really, really skint because of the exchange rate, and they just made us some spaghetti, and it was just spaghetti, and it had some olive oil on it, and some pepper, and some chili. And I think that was all it was. It was like some chili powder or something. And I remember just thinking it was like the most amazing food I'd ever eaten in my life. It was just like cheap spaghetti out of a packet, but it just tasted amazing. And like ever since then, I've always appreciated sometimes like if weight isn't a huge issue, you know, like when we were on Denali, we spent we ate quite a lot of just pasta, just spaghetti, just with butter, just mixed together, and you know, it tasted amazing. Like it's not like it doesn't cook instantaneously, but it doesn't take that long to cook. And if you've got plenty of fuel, it doesn't really matter. And I know quite a few high altitude climbers, they like Italians like Simone Morro, they just eat like the food that we eat at home. So we'd have like pasta and all that kind of stuff. And it's probably good for your soul. Like a bowl of pasta with a tiny bit of Parmesan cheese on, might use a little bit more fuel. It's not that much heavier than some sort of crappy, high altitude food or some, dehydrated food, but it would make you feel so much happier and, more motivated, potentially. And I also like drink a lot. I do drink a lot of tea when I'm climbing. And I think I think most people are the same. Like when they're climbing in like higher altitudes, you just got to just keep drinking and drinking and drinking and drinking. Like you almost, if you got the fuel, like you always want to be drinking the whole time. The more you piss, the more you drink, the more you piss. Like it's, so it's good. It's part of becoming acclimatized. Like you never really want to be feeling like really dehydrated. Like it's just it's like a invitation to get some sort of altitude sickness. I remember Doug Scott. He once told me he would what he would do. They would often like stop in the middle of the afternoon, like late afternoon, and they would like brew up because it meant that they could like carry on later on into the night. And I think I've often thought about that. Like just, if you know if you're going to be climbing, till late, then it's a good, it's a good technique. Actually, my power lead's falling out. 1 second. I'm back. So the first trip to Patagonia, that really taught me the lesson. No, second trip to Patagonia, that taught me that lesson about you have to have food that's going to sustain you. So you need food that's okay for like 2 or 3 days on an alpine route is not going to work for like 2 or 3 weeks in the mountains, and you're kind of like writing checks that your body's going to have to cash. So you want to have some food which is for like on the mountain, like your noodles and whatever. But then for low down, you want to have some like better food. It's still food that's easy to cook and easy to transport, but not sort of starvation diet really, because it's just not good. But I obviously learned that very well, because when we went on to when we climbed the Lafay route on the Drew, I think we were on that for like 15 days, and we actually had a really pathetic diet. I think we had like a tiny little like 100 grams of Alpen for our breakfast, and I don't think we had anything for the daytime. And then we had a packet of noodles for our tea, and we had some butter, and we maybe had we had a packet of peanuts, but we really had like a really minimal amount of food. And it was okay for like day 1, day 2, day 3, but by day 8 and day 10, we were like really, really starving to death. And we had this like butter. The idea was you put the butter into the super noodles, and it would give you some more calories. But we were so hungry that as soon as we opened the bag of food each day, we would just eat the butter like immediately. And we had one packet of peanuts, like a really small packet of peanuts, like you get in a pub or something, and we used to share them out, and that was, that was like hilarious, just like sharing out these peanuts. And they always have this story about like dropping a peanut, and you're in this portal edge together, and it's minus 15 or something, everything's covered in ice, And in the middle of the portal edge, there's a grommet in the floor, which is to drain any water out if it was raining or something. And there's like peanut like going down and like going around and going down through the hole. It was like, no, like one peanut like meant so much. And then I think later on, then I think and then I realised that this idea again about writing these checks or thinking about your future self. So I always put more planning into bringing more food. And I think the like dehydrated food started to improve a little bit. So you could, I think the first time I went on a trip where we had a lot of dehydrated food was when I went to climb the Troll Wall with Alex Gamma, because Alex Gamma was sponsored by some Norwegian dry food company. So we had like tons and tons of dried food. You could probably have it for our breakfast as well. And I come up, it's this stuff you get, it's like in an orange packet. And that was really good. And the carrying the dry food is, it's probably the way to go for anything like serious or, alpine kind of climbing, because it's edible and it's lightweight and it's very low stress. You just open it and you put the thing in and you're aware. If you want to save weight, you can remove the food out of the packets and repackage it into like smaller, lighter packaging and just carry one of the plastic heavy duty things. You put the water in, or you can rehydrate it in something else like a insulated cup or something. If you just got to get your measurements kind of right. And like if you're going in a really cold environment, then you want to take some extra fat, really. I don't think you have a lot of fat in them, because fat is the thing that always goes rancid. Like when I tried to solo the Eiger, and I had some British company, I had this food, and it was actually made, but I think it went bust eventually, but it was made by some like Michelin star chef or something. And I had some food and it had gone off, basically. It had gone rancid, and it was like really disgusting. It was like really it's probably not good for you either to eat rancid food. And you do have to be very careful with dehydrated food. Like ideally you want the dehydrated food where you can see that it's completely sealed, as it's vacuum packed. Because then if it's got a hole in it, then the vacuum, it like expands. You can tell it's got a hole in it. Otherwise, you can get really ill if there's meat in the meal, and it's somehow got the air has got in there. It'll like turn it rancid, and it'll make you really ill. And that happened to. I know two people that happened to, and it's kind of you can like end your trip. If you're arriving in the middle of nowhere and dropped you off in a plane, and then that happens to you, then it's not good. When we were in Alaska, we bought basically I think it was like $160 maybe it was, but it was basically like enough dried food for two people for about 4 or 5 weeks, and maybe we were there for like 6 or 7 weeks. But we mostly bought all this dehydrated food, and we bought like a mixture of different styles and different makes and stuff. And it was interesting what food like really like stood out. Like a lot of it, some of it is just this very, very samey. Like you can't really tell what the difference is. So it's worth bringing along some of the things, like some like hot sauce is quite good, and olive oil and butter and some spices. Like if you're going to be there a long time, it's worth kind of doing that. I remember the one that Vanessa really remembered was chicken and mash, and basically it was like a sachet of mash, and then this like freeze dried chicken, which is like a whole like lump of chicken. What's it called? Like a breast of chicken, and you just sort of pour the water in, and then you poured in the thing, and it all cooked, and it was that was really good. So we were always, I think on Denali we were always like really wishing we could find some more food, because we basically ran out of food in the end anyway. But we found out later on where all the food was probably hidden at the top camp at 17,000 feet. But we didn't know at the time, so we missed it. But we found lots of fuel, but no food. So tailoring the food for different things. So that's one good thing about when you go on like sea kayaking trips, because you can just carry just about everything. What the weight isn't so much of a problem really, unless you're having to move your kayak around. So that's one good thing about it. Where like on other trips, like I went through a phase of carrying dal, like rice. We used to just carry like a bag of rice, a bag of lentils, and a bag of flour, and with that and some spices, and with that we could make basically, if you just you can just mix the rice and the flour. The rice, you can just mix the rice and the lentils together, and then soak it, and then boil it all up, and that's like add some stuff to it, and that's like a meal in itself. And with the flour, you can make chapatis, which are kind of good if you got some butter. Like with chapatis with some butter on it are quite good. But that was so in quite a small package. You could carry like enough food for like 2 weeks or something. But even then we found like we started like really missing pasta, having this real edge for pasta. And I think if your body's like has an edge for something, it means that your food you've got isn't quite right. You've got some sort of deficit in there. And we ended up going to this hut, and there was some really old food in there. And there was some of this like cheese from one of these American MRE meals, these army meals, which was like, I think when I was a kid, because my dad was in the Air Force, we'd often, get this like composite rations, I guess, but like army rations. And there were some really disgusting things in there. There was like bacon burgers, which was just like a tin with, like a normal tin, and you'd like open it out and there'd just be like this big lump of meat, and you'd like chop it all up and you'd fry it. It was like bacon, like, I don't know. So I don't know how the hell they made it. Anyway, and then there was like these like sausages, and it was like all the sausages in a tin with all the like industrial margarine around them and things. But there was this like cheese, and it was some kind of cheese in a squeezy thing, and you like squeeze it on these horrible army biscuits, which would probably last like 1,000 years. And we'd it was the same, but it was exactly the same. This like green foil thing, and I remember there was some really old pasta as well, and we cooked this pasta up and then squeezed this cheese on top of it, and God, it was like amazing. It was like absolutely fantastic. So yeah, that was cool. I guess being able to cook yourself, like if you can't cook at home, then you're not going to be able to cook very well on an expedition. And I think being able to, like, a big thing for me was always not burning. You got a very limited amount of food. You don't want to burn it or ruin it. That's a shooting offense basically. So you have to know how to melt snow. Like melting snow is not as easy as you think. Like you can easily burn a pan with snow in it, and it's like ruins it. And if you've got limited fuel, that's like terrible. I think Colin Haley had some story where he had like almost no fuel left, and he was like, I think when he soloed Mount Hunter, and he just like jammed his pocket rocket. No, he jammed his like jet boil with snow at the top of it, and then he just like fired it up. And what he didn't realize was in the bottom of it, it had some like residual like drinking powder. And as the snow was melting, it created like a void where there was just air and then metal and then this like powder. Then the powder kind of burnt, and then the snow started melting onto it, and then he just created this like sludge, basically this burnt toxic sludge. Then he had to drink it. I think he was like sick or something. So being able to not burn your water is a skill. But learning to cook at home is definitely an advantage if you're going to go somewhere else and you have to cook, in a different place, and like learning how to use a pressure cooker and at home, it's like it sort of pays dividends, like knowing what sort of spices to use, and just like little things like knowing how to make a cheese sauce or whatever. You never really know. Sometimes you can gather together some weird ingredients, and you can make something out of nothing really. I just made lasagna. But speaking of which, I just made this lasagna. So it's funny. I don't know. I've probably said before on this podcast, but at the moment we just make one lot of food, and it lasts. We just make one lot of food, and it lasts up to about 10 days. So we just, divide it all up into containers and put it all in the freezer. So, and we only eat in the afternoon. We only eat at like lunchtime. We don't have dinner or anything. I don't know why that is, but that's how we do it. And so we just have one meal a day basically. And it's quite good because the problem with cooking is you can just end up takes up a lot of time cooking. So you spend like a few hours making something really nice, like a massive lasagna or whatever, and then you just cut it all up and put it all in the freezer. And it seems to work quite well. I think we started doing that when we were in Kuwait, because we used to go to the gym and we get back from the gym really late. So you didn't like in a lot of like Arab countries, like it's just the worst place for fast food. I think Kuwait had like one of the highest obesity and rates in the world, because anything can be delivered to your house like instantly and for almost no money. So there was no point in cooking really. So we did that to try and avoid eating lots of takeaways. So that's why. But it's quite good. It's quite a good system. But if you want the trick for making lasagna is you have to once you've made your lasagna, so it's a layer of meat, a layer of mince, whatever it is. And when you cook your mince, this is an important thing. Whenever you cook mince, you should always cook it for about an hour. You want to get rid of all the fat out of it and or break it all down. So it's really, don't just fry it and then put it in. You have to cook it for about an hour. Same with tomatoes. You should always cook tomatoes for a long time. So you got your tomatoes. So you want to have like onions in there and some what are those things called? Those green things, celery. And you can put some other shit in there if you want it. But so you make your thing, and you got tomatoes in there, this tomatoey sauce kind of thing, and add some. If you have like a kilo of mince, you want to have like a couple of tablespoons of flour in there as well. Mix it all together. It kind of binds it all together. So you get your pan, or whatever you're going to put it in, like one of those things called lasagna dishes, tray things. So you have a layer of meat, a layer of cheese sauce, like cheese sauce basically. You have to learn how to make a cheese sauce. So a layer of cheese sauce, layer of the pasta, layer of mince, layer of cheese sauce, layer of pasta, layer of mince, layer of cheese sauce, and then cheese on the top. And the trick is you got to leave it overnight, because you want the pasta has to absorb the cheese sauce and the meat, so everything is like soggy before you put it in the oven. So yeah, but lasagna is a good one. It's very easy to make it. Like a lot of Italian food is like very good to make it. We just eventually got off living off curry basically. Eventually found the way to make the perfect chicken tikka masala, like how you would make it from like you'd get it from a takeaway. And now we've moved. Now that was like the pinnacle of my life's work, was to make it exactly like from. But it's a lot of hassle to make it like that. So anyway, so now we're on the lasagna. So well, anyway, so yeah. So is that everything on food? Anything else I could say about food? Yeah, I guess like the dehydrated food, it really. Like it's not good if you like. I really hate having to share it. I really hate having one thing of food and having to share it between two people. That's one thing, and I'm never keen on. But you just have to make sure you got like the right kind of size. And I think as you get higher on a route, you tend to eat less. Like sometimes like. If you've got a lot of food, you might find you're not so into it higher up. And not this thing about not liking fat. I think it's probably true, but I think everyone's different. Like some people can eat at high altitude, and other people can't. Makes them feel ill and stuff. Makes them feel sick. So yeah. So anything I say, anything you read, you've always got to find your own way. But probably, I think Neil McCaddy once told me that if you don't eat it, if you don't like it down on the ground, you don't like it. You won't like it up there. So that's kind of that was probably one of the best bits of advice I've been given. So I think my good wife has finished watching her rom-com, so I shall finish it here. If anybody's got any questions or anything they want to ask about anything else, then drop me a line. I've got a few emails I'll have to cover later on. And goodbye for now.
This is KDK12 calling KDK1.